The government has petitioned the Supreme Court for permission to allocate spectrum for specific purposes such as satellite communication, defense, and PSC use and metro or railway operations instead of the auction route as mandated in 2012 following the 2G scam. Despite the 2012 ruling, the government had been administratively allocating spectrum for national security and public infrastructure needs. The petition in the new law also includes spectrum for space communication in the scope of administrative allocation. However, these allocations come with the rider that they are provisional until the government makes final decision on pricing on policy as per the SC verdict on the spectrum case. The original verdict, prompted by the cancellation of the 2G spectrum licenses issued by the UPA government, emphasized the necessity of auctioning natural resources to ensure fairness and transparency. The government is now seeking a modification to allow for administrative allocation of spectrum under certain circumstances, such as when it serves governmental function or public interest, or when auctioning is impractical due to technical or economic reasons. The 2G spectrum scandal involved illicit undercharging of mobile telephony companies for frequency allocation licenses, leading to the distribution of 2G subscription for cell phones. Initially granted in 2008 on a first-come, first-served basis at 2001 prices, these licenses were later annulled by the Supreme Court in 2012. The scandal significantly impacted the UPA government, with many political analysts attributing as a major factor leading to the downfall of the Manmohan Singh government in 2014 Lok Sabha election. The opposition now pointing out how the BJP had opposed the 2G allocation process in the first instance, saying that the policy of first come, first serve was wrong. Let's dip into Supriya Srinath's bite.
It's the absolute duplicity and hypocrisy of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Natural resources should have been monetized. We started the auction of spectrum, which would have ensured the greatest and the highest monetization of India's natural resources. Why does the BJP want to shut auction and begin allocation now? Because you want to distribute at pittance, at absolutely no cost, precious spectrum to your friends. The reality is that spectrum is a scarce resource. It's a natural resource that should be monetized, which is why we started the auction process, which would have led to maximum monetization of that resource, which would have filled the coffers of the government. But the duplicity and hypocrisy of the Bharatiya Janata Party is absolutely evident here.
The only thing I can say is that life has come a full circle when it comes to 2G auction. On this, I am joined by my legal affairs editor, Ashok Bagaria, and input editor, Brijesh Pandey. Ashok, first to you. Is it surprising, or was it coming?
Well, it's not surprising. This kind of a petition was in the pipeline for many, many years. Now, you have to understand, in 2012, the issue before the Supreme Court was the first come, first serve policy, which was adopted by the UPA government to allocate spectrum for commercial use, that is for telecommunication purposes. And this was challenged in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, it was a 2008 policy. The Supreme Court in 2012 delivered a verdict, not because that the government was not adequately monetizing the spectrum, but because the route adopted by the government was non-transparent and was being used by unscrupulous elements to make financial benefits. This is what the Supreme Court said. Now, they also said, when they struck down this first come, first serve policy, they were conscious of the fact, the Supreme Court was conscious of the fact that what should replace it. And the Supreme Court then went on to say that auction is the best method for allocation of natural resources / public property. Now, spectrum is a valuable natural resource. So, today the government of India is confronted with a very peculiar situation. It has gone to the Supreme Court saying that, look, here is the spectrum, which is a valuable natural resource. it is used for commercial purposes like telecommunication and non-communication purposes like safety, security, disaster preparedness, and for purposes which subserve the common interest of the people. And they are saying that spectrum which is not for which will be used for non-commercial purposes should be allocated by administratively determined prices, which means prices determined by the government of India, and there should be no auction.
Okay. Brijesh, that's the legal part of it. But there's a political part of it. I would have expected the Congress to go to town on this issue, to create a velocity, a political velocity on it. That hasn't happened.
Well, that hasn't happened on any major controversy which has been handed by the Supreme Court to the Congress party, starting with electoral bond. I repeatedly asked the Congress spokesperson here in this show, she kept on saying only one protest is happening, that is the Padayatra of Rahul Gandhi. So, right now Congress is in a state of absolute political inertia, and that is reflecting. And if you look at the 2012 time, Karthikeya, you would understand that there is a difference between how a strong government works and how a government which is working or which is operating on the crutches of their coalition partners works. Then government was that, it was not like A. Raja was actively listening to or was, making everybody privy to the decision which he was taking, the kind of, muscling in which was done, the kind of under-table charges and, favors which were extended and all. They cared to hoots about the propriety and all because they know that the government dependent on them. Right now, the situation is completely different. The government has an absolute majority. It has almost, in Lok Sabha, it has absolute majority. In Rajya Sabha also, they can, if they want, get any bill passed through, ways which are known to everybody. The fact of the matter is that, the government has here tried to make a distinction between a commercial use of spectrum and a must use which is used in the public interest of spectrum, spectrum which is used in the public interest. And what they're saying is that when we go for commercial, we will go for the auction, which is the route which has been suggested by the Supreme Court. But when it comes to this, like, using it in the national calamity or something like that, then let us go for, instead going for commercial this thing, let us go for a proper vote. The second thing is that, you have to understand that this government is not like the government in 2012, which was literally running like a headless chicken. They control the narrative, and that is the reason why, and unfortunately at that point of time, the quality of opposition is also very, very different. 2012, the quality of the opposition was the government which is right now in power. They went to town, they hit roads, they created so much ruckus that all of a sudden, the government which was considered to be above, like Caesar's wife, was all of a sudden being portrayed or seen as that the only thing which they are is corrupt. And that is the reason they were not able to defend it.
Is it also, Ashok, to do with the fact that how you perceive your Prime Minister or how you perceive the cabinet or the government of the day? Doesn't it just boil down to the fact that people have more faith in the system now than they had faith in a system which was being pulverized from number of sides?
Well, here the question is not of the people of the country having the faith in the Prime Minister. It is about judicial interpretation of a previous judgment. The 2012 judgment was very clear that auction is the only way for the use of spectrum. Now, here this particular judgment is proving to be a stumbling block for the government of India, or the government of India is trying to showcase to the Supreme Court that your 2012 verdict is a huge hurdle in a way for allocation of spectrum for public utility purposes. We want to go the non-auction route, please allow us to go it. And they are also saying that the question whether the government was authorized to give spectrum for non-commercial uses at government administered prices was never a part of the argument in 2012. So, they are saying that we want a clarity. However, judicially, you have to understand, when you talk about natural resources, it is not just about spectrum, it is also about water, air, precious metals that we mine from the heart of the earth. Everything is a part of natural resource. So, tomorrow we could also see, if the Supreme Court allows this clarification or makes a clarification, tomorrow this petition or this application might have the effect of opening the floodgates for other people also to come in to the Supreme Court and said that this was never the matter, this was never the issue before you, the issue was allocation of spectrum for telecom purposes. You cannot pass an order for purposes which it was not meant or which was not argued. So, it is a very tricky situation that the Supreme Court will find itself in when they try to adjudicate on this issue, because here the government is trying to take a high moral ground that look, we are using this spectrum. See, at the end of the day, the government of the day is the trustee of this natural resource.
So, basically the difference is that there was an investigation way back in post 2007. Here the government has gone to the court with a plea.
See, the government has tried to make a distinction.
Yes.
What the government has done is that, see, 2012 case is a completely different case. 2000 case was not of the spectrum allocation. 2012 case was the fraudulent methods which were adopted. It was a criminal case. You know, it was about the fraudulent case, and then the Supreme Court went one step ahead and said that the entire policy is fraught with dangers of this act being repeated and re-repeated again. And that is the reason why they came up with a theory that auction is the best policy. Now this government is going for the distinction. And if I may answer the question which you first part of the question which you asked, Ashok, is that whether people perceive Prime Minister to be strong or not. It is a given fact that Karthikeya, at that point of time, the government did not invested in narration building. They never allowed people to run away with the narrative. The opposition was there on the street. They were fighting against the government day in, day out, inside the parliament, on the road. Do you see the same opposition which was then in government doing the same? Barring one press conference, 10, 20 tweets. Do you see people on ground? You don't.
I think it was 2G was a daily exercise. There used to be daily backroom briefing at Mr. Jaitley's residence, at his office as an LOP. I mean, so it just continued.
And it also showed opposition's gumption for fight. You are right now, you are not seeing any of the gumption which was displayed by the Bharatiya Janata Party when it was in the opposition. I think that character is something which is making the differentiating factor right now.